Attention, Canadians. Do you feel disconnected from our current political system? This could be our last chance to take a real legal stand for our rights. It's time to shift the political power to its rightful owners, the Canadian citizens and Indigenous peoples of Canada. Dive into our history, understand the need for change, and embark on the quest for true democracy. Are you concerned about our nation's commitment to human rights and self-governance? The power shift to freedom aligns.
Hello, everybody. Just thought I would cut it off here for a second and welcome you all. But we're going to be playing that at the end so that you'll be able to see exactly what needs to be done here in Canada. So anyways, we are actually 3:38 p.m. on Tuesday, the 14th of January, and it's been a roller coaster since November, or actually for the last 5 years. But anyway, if you've noticed that I've played a video earlier in regards to who is really behind the scenes that nobody really hears about. So anyways, a lot of things are coming out in the open. We're finally seeing the truth within some stuff. But at the same time, it's really important that people understand that if you hear anybody say referendums in Canada, Canada already has the right to referendum, but it's our governments that decide when and where we're going to get a referendum. Okay. And the provinces can have them for their provinces, but it really needs to be when something major is happening. It's got to be, that affect all Canadians in regards to our resources and everything like that. It has to go federal. So anyways, we've never really had chances to do what we wanted with referendums, and they don't really serve any purpose unless they get very descriptive. Okay. And we know that even plebiscites don't work, or plebiscites, I should say. Or, anyways, either one. I have a hard time with those words. But anyways, the referendums themselves, what we've done is we created our own referendum. We have the legal right to do so from the international laws, and there's nothing the government can do about it. However, the government is supposed to help us. But right now, with what's going on in government and all of the corruption and everything else, we've had no choice but to move forward with this. So now it remains to be seen. We need to get the international to recognize it, as well as the Canadian citizens. And that's a real problem. So now I've noticed that there's a lot of things happening. Taking some of, a lot of our stuff that we've said that we've been promoting for years are coming out from others. And, but mind you, they never talk about us, right? So they take our information and use it for their own and then trash us. And that's the sad reality. I've been posting on different YouTube channels to, guys who are talking in the media and on YouTube and have huge followers, and they always delete our message. And that's the sad reality. So now it's, we're on our own. And so we've got everybody kind of against what we're doing because they want to control. They want to control the narrative. And then they don't want us to do exactly what we're doing. Okay. And the reason being is that the only way we're going to be able to save this country for ourselves, our future, our natural resources, and for the benefit of the people and our children and future generations to come is to do exactly what we've designed at the CPU for a referendum, and to remove the head of state. Okay. And right now that would be the Governor General in a sense, but really it's King Charles. And there's a way of keeping things going. And then I'm going to prove to you today how a monarchy is so much better than a republic. A republic, you're just changing one dictatorship for another. So I'm also going to be talking about the North American Union. If anybody remembers in 2008, when all of this broke out within the Security Prosperity Partnership Agreements, if you think you can trust the conservatives, you better think again. Okay. Liberals, conservatives, all the same pot. Okay. So anyways, unless you know the history, unless you've researched a lot, you're not going to know this information. It might even overwhelm you. But when Trump talks about an economic partnership and O'Leary talks about we need an economic partnership, well, they're coming in for the kill. And the kill started back in 1983 with Brian Mulroney. Okay. That was sent to us by the Bush family to be able to do the NAFTA deals and everything like that. And then with Brian Mulroney, what happened is there's, information out there that the person who helped change documents in the NAFTA deal for Mulroney, okay, behind the backs of all of the premiers and everybody else, and increase the totals in the benefit of the United States. Well, we're the ones subsidizing the United States, okay? But in reality, so there's a lot of corruption also that has been done by the conservatives in the past. We can't forget that, because although Mulroney's gone now, and I have no sympathy there, Stephen Harper is very much in the mix. Please watch Danielle Smith and the conservatives. And if you see that the federal, when the liberals fall at the federal level, okay, there's a switchover, right? So now the conservatives are falling at the provincial level. Now, but the conservatives are going to take over the federal level. Now the liberals are going to take over the provincial level and the NDP. So it's just a bait and switch. Okay. So again, please, people, keep one thing in mind. You want to save this country and make sure that nobody can take it away from your children, their natural resources. We should be turning taxation into dividends. No reason to be taxed the way we are. No reason for people like O'Leary, who wants a North American Union, economic union, because once you hear about this, you'll see that all of our natural resources in 2008, Robert Pastor and John Manley wrote a book on that. The first one was called the North American Union. And then they got so much flack from it that they changed it to building a North American community. And this is where the Amero came in, and then the talk of Bitcoin and all of this. Everything is a play. Everything's a play. And for our benefits, and to keep us dumb and stupid and ignorant. Well, the only thing that can save this planet and every country is what we're doing at the CPU, for everybody to become collective head of states of each of their countries, and to protect those natural resources and the resources of the people, because the oligarchs and the Trumpers are not going to do it for us. And I proved that earlier. So now we're going to go on to a video that you really need to learn from. And you can see that humans, yes, keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And we need to stop being lazy, stop being afraid of, having to make decisions, and stop relying on others to wipe your ass. Okay, because when we're looking at politicians and our system of governance, that's exactly what we're doing when we're saying, oh, well, now the conservatives will be able to clean up the mess. We can only rely on ourselves, on each other. Okay, and that's a sad reality, and that's where we are today. So I'm going to move on to this video here so that you can watch it. Okay. Now we will start it. Oops.
Policies, they create them, where state power isn't just swayed by wealth, it's wielded by it. Sounds familiar? Well, over 2,300 years ago, in his great work Politics, Aristotle identified a system of government he called oligarchy, rule by the wealthy few. Based on his studies of history and politics, he described how this system arises, how it maintains power, and why it's inherently unstable. As you read Aristotle's description of oligarchy, you might start to recognize some unsettling parallels to your own society today. From the concentration of wealth to the influence of money in politics, Aristotle's ancient insights in many ways feel eerily modern. So in the next few minutes, we'll break down Aristotle's blueprint of oligarchy, perhaps uncovering how its ancient patterns may still occasionally echo in the corridors of power today. To understand Aristotle's view of oligarchy, we first need to understand his categories of regime types. In his typical systematic approach, Aristotle identified 6 distinct types of government, divided into 2 categories. There are the true forms and their perverted counterparts. Within the 3 true forms, we have monarchy first. In its ideal form, the monarch would be virtuous and govern for the common good. Next is aristocracy, which is ruled by a select few. For Aristotle, these aren't just the wealthy or the well-born, but the aristos, meaning the best, most virtuous, and most capable members of society. The third true form is what Aristotle called polity, sometimes translated as constitutional government. This is a mixed system, blending elements of democracy and oligarchy, but with a strong legal basis that prevents any powerful group from abusing the others. Now, for each of these, Aristotle identified a corresponding perverted form, a government that shares similarities with its true counterpart, but has deviated from the path of virtue and common good. Monarchy's corrupt twin is tyranny, as I presented in a previous video, and democracy is seen by Aristotle as the perverted form of polity. It's ruled by the masses, but without the legal limits of the polity, where decisions are driven by the majority's desires rather than the common good. For Aristotle, this often leads to demagoguery, instability, and the erosion of justice. And finally, we come to oligarchy. As Aristotle notes, the poor and the rich fight with each other, and whichever side wins doesn't set up a fair or popular government. Instead, they see political power as their prize for winning, and one side sets up democracy, while the other sets up an oligarchy. Remember, aristocracy is ruled by the aristos, or the best. Oligarchy, on the other hand, is a perversion of this ideal. In an oligarchy, focus shifts from the welfare of the community to the interests of the rulers themselves. It's no longer about who is most capable or most dedicated to the common good, but about who has the most money or property. In aristocracy, leaders are chosen based on their ability to govern well and their commitment to the public interest. In oligarchy, the path to power is paved with gold, and the purpose of rule becomes the preservation and expansion of the ruler's wealth and influence. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process from usually polity, democracy, or aristocracy, and often subtle at first. Perhaps wealth starts as just one factor among many in selecting leaders, but over time, it becomes the dominant or even sole criterion. Or maybe virtuous leaders slowly begin to prioritize their own interests over those of the community. Aristotle noted that oligarchies, like tyrannies, are forms of government where power is used to benefit those in control rather than the broader community. So both systems are self-serving, but while tyranny is ruled by one person and his close circle, an oligarchy is ruled by a few more individuals. But more importantly, tyrants often rely on military force, whereas oligarchs first and foremost gain and maintain their power through their wealth. This is sometimes written into the law, but often it's just based on informal influence, which leads to laws and policies that favor the wealthy. The main point is that power is kept within the wealthy few, either through high property qualifications for holding office, or by making the process of running for office too expensive for most people. This financial control allows them to operate within existing legal and political systems, manipulating these systems to suit their needs. This gives oligarchies an appearance of legitimacy, making them seem more stable than tyrannies, but Aristotle still considered them unstable at their core. Oligarchs are skilled at using their political power to protect and grow their wealth. They might pass laws that give them lucrative government contracts, protect business monopolies, or create regulations that limit competition. These tactics can sometimes lead to supreme oligarchy, where the wealthy have unchecked power and ignore any appearance of cultural or constitutional limits. In these cases, decisions are made solely for the benefit of the ruling elite rather than for the good of society. This disregard for the common good is another trait that oligarchies share with tyrannies, making them similarly dangerous to a state's stability. Also, like tyrants, oligarchs tend to distrust the general population. They might disarm the common people and hire foreign mercenaries to guard against potential uprisings. This reflects their very real fear of losing control, leading them to keep the poor at bay, sometimes even pushing them out of cities by making urban living too expensive, or taking more direct measures to maintain their grip on power. Aristotle pointed out that oligarchy isn't a single uniform system, but rather a spectrum with different types. On one end, there are extreme forms where only the very richest have power. In other forms, a small, powerful minority controls the government, and while it might seem open to those with modest wealth, it remains firmly in the hands of a gatekeeping inner circle. So how do these oligarchies come to power? Aristotle explained that it often starts with a gradual shift. A small group of people begin to accumulate more wealth, which in turn allows them to gain more political influence. As their power grows, they shape policies and institutions in ways that further increase their wealth, creating a cycle where wealth leads to power and power leads to more wealth. A system that seems democratic or aristocratic can start to slide into oligarchy without most people noticing. Over time, certain signs become clearer. The wealthiest begin to control all key government roles and institutions. Merit and ability become less important than wealth for gaining leadership positions. And the idea that economic inequality also justifies political inequality becomes more accepted. Once an oligarchy is established, the people in power use several tactics to keep their hold on power. First, they use state power to keep class distinctions in place, reinforcing social barriers that prevent people from moving up. This might involve controlling the education system to ensure that only their children can afford the opportunities for leadership roles, or enacting laws that make it harder for those born into lower classes to build wealth or social status. Gradually, oligarchies take control over the legal system and lawmaking process. They shape laws to serve their interests, often claiming they are just protecting property rights or maintaining economic stability. This can mean taxes that benefit the wealthy, or regulations that protect their businesses from competition. Eventually, the wealthy begin to exert influence over all crucial aspects of society, perhaps the primary industries, major trade routes, or the means of cultural production. Furthermore, oligarchies rely on strong alliances among elites. These aren't just political alliances, but also social and economic connections, like intermarriage between powerful families, shared business interests, and exclusive clubs. These connections create a tightly knit ruling class that works together to maintain its control. Over time, this concentration of power and wealth often leads to a decline in public virtue, where personal gain takes priority over the common good among all members of society. At this point, you might be wondering how these ancient insights apply to the world around us. While Aristotle was examining the city-states of ancient Greece, his observations on oligarchy were remarkably astute and perhaps relevant to a few other societies throughout history. Let's consider some signs that might indicate the presence of oligarchic tendencies. First, look at laws and regulations that benefit the wealthy at the expense of the general populace or society at large. This isn't always obvious. It might be hidden in complex tax codes or subtle regulatory structures. Imagine, for instance, a tax code that allows owners of luxury yachts to claim significant deductions while providing no comparable options for ordinary citizens. Next, examine economic policies. Do they tend to increase concentration of wealth? Aristotle noted that oligarchies use their power to further enrich themselves. Consider a hypothetical society where the government consistently bails out large corporations, which hits the general population with inflation, higher taxes, and reduced public services. Over time, this could lead to increased wealth concentration. Another key indicator is access to political office. In a true oligarchy, only the wealthy can realistically attain positions of power. As mentioned, this might not be an explicit law, but picture a hypothetical political system where running for office requires millions in personal funds or backing from wealthy donors. This effectively restricts political participation to the rich or those supported by the rich. Related to this is the question of who has genuine access to lawmakers and regulators. In an oligarchic system, the wealthy few have the ear of those in power, while ordinary citizens struggle to make their voices heard. Imagine a scenario where industry leaders regularly hold private meetings with lawmakers and powerful bureaucrats to discuss policy, while requests for meetings from ordinary citizens and smaller organizations are usually denied or ignored. Also look for a so-called revolving door between government and the private sector. If you see a constant flow of individuals moving between positions of political power and high-level corporate roles, that might indicate the kind of close alliance between wealth and governance that Aristotle associated with oligarchy. Picture a situation where a high-ranking official in the finance ministry leaves his post for a lucrative position in a major bank, or a former minister getting hired in a corporation within his former portfolio. Social mobility is another crucial factor. Aristotle understood that oligarchies work to maintain class distinctions. Consider a hypothetical society where the cost of education has skyrocketed to the point where only the children of wealthy families can attend universities without incurring crippling debt, thereby limiting opportunities for advancement for those from less affluent backgrounds. Remember, Aristotle didn't see these as isolated factors, but as symptoms of a political system that prioritizes the interests of the wealthy few over the common good. No society perfectly fits any single model of governance, and elements that might appear oligarchic could exist within various other political systems. The key is to look at the overall pattern and to consider how political and economic power are distributed and used. The good news is that Aristotle found oligarchies to be inherently unstable, second only to tyrannies in their short lifespan. The bad news is that they are often replaced by another perverted form of government. He recognized that political regimes fall for many reasons, but he saw revolt as a primary cause, particularly in oligarchies. One interesting observation he made was about the introduction of new cultural or ethnic groups into an existing political community. He argued that this could be a significant source of instability and conflict, especially if these groups don't quickly develop a shared sense of identity or common purpose with the existing population. Internal conflict among the oligarchs themselves is another major factor. This could be a situation where a small group within the oligarchy becomes greedy and attempts to monopolize all the offices of power. Aristotle noted that his hyper-concentration of power often leads to resentment and conflict within the ruling class, destabilizing the entire system. Perhaps the most significant threat to oligarchies, in Aristotle's view, comes from popular revolt against state-sanctioned oppression. The constant tension between the rich and the poor creates a powder keg of social unrest. He also noted the role of populist leaders. These figures would emerge and capitalize on the people's discontent by promising reforms. While this will sometimes lead to one of the three so-called true regime types, Aristotle observed that they often result in a new oligarchy or even tyranny. Another fascinating insight from Aristotle concerns the generational aspect of oligarchic decline. He said that the children of oligarchs, raised in luxury and comfort, tend to become degenerate and weak over time. Meanwhile, the children of the poor are hardened by their difficult circumstances and become tough. This disparity equips the poor to rebel successfully against their rulers. As we wrap up, Aristotle's analysis of oligarchy provides us with some timeless insights into the dynamics of wealth and power in governance. From the gradual rise of oligarchic rule to the tactics used by the wealthy few to maintain their grip on power, these ancient observations may, perhaps, maybe, resonate a bit in our modern world. I'd love to hear your perspective. Are there parallels you can draw to your own society? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this exploration valuable, please consider joining our Patreon. Supporters get access to audio-only versions of our videos, and your support is crucial in our mission to bring these timeless ideas to a wider audience. Thank you for watching. They control the wealth, they control the laws, and they control the system, but they can't control everything forever. In our previous exploration of oligarchy, Aristotle uncovered how the wealthy few don't just influence society, but shape its very foundations. That video resonated with over 1 million people across the entire political spectrum from every corner of the world. Why? Because based on the comment section, they felt this is happening in their own nations. A few powerful people controlling not just wealth, but the fundamental rules that govern our lives. But there's something we didn't cover in that video. Hidden in Aristotle's politics lies something more. His writing did not just reveal how oligarchies work. He also discovered something that should make every tyrant and oligarch nervous. These systems that seem invincible often follow patterns of decline, and when they appear strongest, when their control seems absolute, that's often when they're most vulnerable. Aristotle mapped out when and how these moments of vulnerability emerge. What makes some attempts at change succeed while others fail? And most crucially, how to ensure that when change comes, it leads to one of the so-called true regime forms, rather than something even worse. So I thought it'd be interesting to break down Aristotle's implied blueprint for ending oligarchies. We'll discover how to recognize these critical moments of opportunity, why timing matters more than strength, and most importantly, how to avoid the traps that have doomed many attempts at change. Change is coming. It always does. The question isn't if, but when, what comes next, and how to impact that. First, let's remind ourselves that Aristotle wasn't theorizing about political change from some abstract position. He tutored powerful leaders like Alexander the Great, and he studied over 150 different Greek city-states and foreign regimes. As both a philosopher and an empirical observer, he noticed patterns repeating throughout history, and these patterns reveal something valuable about how power changes hands. Many feel that the best, no, the only way to end an oppressive regime is through open revolution, but Aristotle found something much more complex. When studying countless political transformations, he noticed that the most aggressive revolutions often produce the worst outcomes. Take Syracuse under Dionysius. The dramatic overthrow led by Dion promised liberation, but ultimately created an even more oppressive system. The revolutionary had rallied the people with visions of freedom, only to deliver another form of tyranny. And we've seen many such cases in recent history too. This is why Aristotle advocated for gradual reform rather than violent upheaval. In politics, he writes that changes in government should not be attempted at once, but rather by small degrees, warning that those who lead a successful revolution will gain all the power of the state for themselves. For Aristotle, the continued stability of the political system was essential, not just for order's sake, but because stable systems allowed for the kind of incremental improvements that could enhance citizens' lives without risking catastrophic collapse. Most of the successful political transformations he studied were ones where people barely realized they were happening until they were done. But that perspective presents a significant issue, because this led him to focus mostly on gradual top-down reforms by those already within the spheres of power. But what if you're not part of the ruling class, or even ruling class adjacent? Of course, you could attempt to become a reforming part of the oligarchy yourself, which is not necessarily a bad strategy. But when that's not possible, what are you supposed to do then? Just wait and hope for benevolent reforms from above? This is where we need to go a bit beyond what Aristotle explicitly said by reading somewhat between the lines while still adhering to his analysis. During his studies, Aristotle noticed something curious about power. He saw that political systems tended to move through distinct phases, each with their own characteristics and vulnerabilities. What he observed was subtle but important. Political systems don't just change randomly, but they're not mechanically predictable either. Instead, they tend to face specific types of decay that can be reversed or accelerated by human action. For example, a monarchy turns into a tyranny when the ruler starts prioritizing self-interest over the common good. A polity risks degradation to democracy when it caters to the immediate desires of the masses rather than the long-term good of society. And an aristocracy often drifts toward oligarchy when the elite become consumed by greed rather than merit and virtue. Aristotle argued that these corrupted forms of government are even less stable than their good counterparts because they are fundamentally unjust. Tyrannies are inherently fragile because they rely on force and lack the support of the people. Over time, the ruler's abuses lead to resistance, rebellion, or assassination. And democracies are almost as unstable because they lack the guiding principles of justice and virtue. This reveals a crucial pattern. What those in power do to make their power absolute often end up making it more fragile. When they silence opposition, they isolate themselves and lose vital feedback about what's happening in society. When they hoard wealth, they create resentment and alternative power centers, and when they eliminate rivals, they destroy the very institutions that could help stabilize their rule. While dismantling institutions may provide short-term control, it removes the foundations for sustainable governance, leaving the regime vulnerable to collapse or external threats. And that leads to an exciting revelation. If political systems tend to face predictable challenges, and if certain actions create specific weaknesses in that system, then that allows us to identify when a corrupt system is vulnerable to change. And perhaps even more importantly, you can recognize what kind of actions are more likely to succeed at different moments. This isn't deterministic prophecy, of course, but Aristotle saw these tendencies play out again and again, and while no two situations are identical, the underlying dynamics of power, how it concentrates, how it corrupts, and how it potentially transforms, do follow recognizable patterns. And it's these patterns we need to understand if we want to see how and when change becomes possible. And just like all the other regime types, oligarchies have their own life cycles and fragilities. Think about how wealth becomes political power. It starts subtly. A few successful individuals or families begin shaping things in their favor. Maybe it's through campaign contributions, media ownership, or funding think tanks. They don't usually stage a coup. Instead, they play a longer game. Year by year, they indirectly shape tax policies, regulations, and market rules until their advantages become self-reinforcing. Their wealth buys influence, and that influence helps them accumulate more wealth. Then comes the consolidation phase. The rules themselves begin to transform. What started as informal influence gets encoded into law. Think about how seemingly neutral technical adjustments to campaign rules, corporate structures, tax frameworks, and so on slowly reshape the playing field. Each change appears small and sometimes even reasonable in isolation. A tweak here, an adjustment there. But step back and look at the whole picture. These individual changes form an architecture of power, each piece reinforcing the others. But over time, these regimes enter what we could call a degeneration phase. Think about what happens when any group or individual becomes too comfortable in a position of power. At first, they try to justify their privileges, they're job creators, they do it for the people, they are saving the economy, think of the children, and so on. But gradually something shifts. The justifications become thinner, more perfunctory. Eventually, they stop bothering to justify at all. Public resources become their personal piggy bank, public institutions their private toolset, and public concerns are barely worth acknowledging. This is exactly when they look strongest on the surface. They've got everything under their control. The money, the power, the institutions. Look at how the 30 tyrants controlled Athens. They had all the weapons, all the wealth, total formal authority. They thought they were showing strength by ruthlessly eliminating critics, hoarding wealth, and crushing dissent. Yet they were creating the perfect conditions for their own overthrow. What makes this pattern so important is how it reveals the paradox of power, strength becoming weakness, control breeding its own instability. When those in charge respond to challenges by becoming more controlling, they often accelerate their own decline. Their harsh policies alienate potential allies. Their visible excesses create silent resentment. Their internal rivalries fracture their unity. Think of it like holding sand. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. The more they crush dissent, the more they create the conditions for their own undoing. They lose touch with reality, lose critical feedback, lose the legitimate authority that originally let them govern. It's not that they become weak. They still have all the surface power, but they become brittle. And that brittleness, more than any external enemy, is what ultimately threatens their rule. But perhaps most importantly for those watching closely, this pattern reveals moments of opportunity for the oppressed. Because understanding these phases is not just about predicting decline, it's about recognizing opportunities. Each phase has its own vulnerabilities, its own pressure points, and its own possibilities for transformation. And this brings us to the crucial question. How do you recognize when a system is entering its vulnerable phases? What subtle signs signal that change might be possible? Because, as Aristotle observed, timing often matters more than strength. So how do we know when change is nigh for oligarchy, specifically? Aristotle observed several critical indicators that often converge to create what we could call a perfect storm. The first sign is perhaps the most obvious, yet often misunderstood. When public dissatisfaction flares up, it's not really the volume of complaints that matters, it's their nature. The oligarchs can handle protests against a new tax on farmland. They can manage complaints about inflation, and they love when isolated issues like minimum wages or subsidies release some pent-up steam. But Aristotle observed that while a state can handle many types of protests, the real danger comes when people stop believing the state serves its proper end, the good life and virtue of its citizens. So, when protests shift from specific grievances to fundamental questions of justice, not just is this fair, but is our whole system serving its purpose, that's when things are about to boil over. This total erosion of legitimacy typically happens in three distinct but interconnected ways. First, while Aristotle recognized the importance of private property, he warned against the wealthy treating common things as their own, like when public spaces become effectively private, when shared infrastructure serves only elite interests, when common goods like water and, in our times, airwaves and digital networks become de facto personal property of the economic political class. Second, Aristotle was particularly concerned when the laws and customs that the oligarchs themselves established start being ignored whenever convenient. They impose austerity on the masses while they themselves live in luxury. They praise competition until they need to crush rivals. They talk about innovation while blocking new ideas that might threaten their position. As Aristotle noted, this hypocrisy undermines the very foundation of law, which should apply equally to all. Third, and perhaps most fundamentally, when rulers become disconnected from the virtues and values they're supposed to exemplify. Aristotle believed that legitimate rule required not just wealth or power, but moral excellence. If oligarchs from their isolated positions push radical social transformations while being entirely disconnected from their impacts on ordinary communities, if they advocate for fundamental changes to how people live, work, and raise their children, all while being insulated from the consequences of these changes, they hold in contempt the very cultural traditions and social bonds that most communities consider essential to their way of life. The gap becomes no longer just economic, but moral and cultural. This triple erosion of public resources, of rules for thee, not for me, and of shared cultural values creates a fundamental crisis of legitimacy. But the thing is, Aristotle observed that public dissatisfaction alone rarely triggers change. What makes a moment truly critical is when it combines with internal division among the ruling class itself. While studying different city-states, he noticed that oligarchies often fall not from external pressure, but from disputes among those in power. For example, between different business interests, preventing them from presenting a united front. When oligarchs start infighting over market regulations or resource control, they create openings they'd never allow if united. And the final crucial sign of changing winds is the emergence of new leaders and voices, but not always where you'd expect. The crucial voices often don't come from traditional opposition. They come from entrepreneurs who've built independent economic power, from respected professionals who've stayed above factional disputes, and from people who can bridge different social classes and interest groups. Crucially, Aristotle observed that change leading to a more just system, rather than change to some other oligarchy or tyranny, must involve the middle class. Positive change has to come through those who occupy a middle position between extremes of wealth and poverty, those who have enough property to be independent, but not so much as to be corrupted by luxury. What makes the middle class effective is their ability to combine virtue with practical wisdom. They aren't typically the most radical voices calling for revolution, nor are they part of the established oligarchy. Instead, they are ordinary people who understand both what is good and what is possible, a combination Aristotle saw as essential for any meaningful political change. Most importantly, leaders representing the middle class succeed because they understand what Aristotle considered the true purpose of the state. Not just stability or wealth, but the good life that comes through the practice of virtue. So how does this help us understand when and how to act? Interpreting Aristotle's observations suggests a few crucial approaches. First, build alternative sources of power. They don't need to, and probably shouldn't, be direct confrontations with oligarchic authority. Instead, focus on creating independent economic networks, developing new technologies, or establishing cultural institutions that operate outside traditional power structures. Think of it as building a parallel system rather than directly confronting the existing one. This is exactly what emerging merchant classes did in many Greek cities, gradually accumulating influence through trade networks that the traditional power base couldn't control as easily. Second, form intentional coalitions, but not the kind you might imagine. Successful challenges to entrenched power rarely come from single interest groups. Instead, effective transformations happen when different people find common cause. Consider how in many Greek city-states, the emerging commercial class often allied with small farmers against the traditional landed upper class. Today, this could, for example, mean bringing together tech innovators frustrated by monopolistic practices, traditional businesses, and middle-class citizens seeking economic stability and a normal life. Third, understand and exploit system weaknesses. When oligarchies abuse their power, they create openings. Think about it this way. Every time oligarchs break their own stated principles, they create what we might call legitimacy gaps, or a discrepancy between the expectations of how leaders should act and how they actually act. The key is matching your response to their specific contradictions. When they champion meritocracy while practicing nepotism, document and publicize clear cases of unearned privilege. When they compromise courts, utilize dispute resolution systems. When they preach free markets but practice monopoly, rally the natural coalition of small business owners crushed by unfair competition and consumers tired of inflated prices. Your responses should not only challenge existing power, but demonstrate a better way forward. Turn their contradictions into stepping stones toward positive change. Each of these compensating moves creates new vulnerabilities, new contradictions, and new potential points of leverage. As Archimedes said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." Fourth, and this is crucial, develop political virtue. It's not just about personal morality, it's about building the capacity for effective action. An oligarchy's greatest weakness often lies in its inability to generate genuine loyalty or collective purpose. They rule through power rather than legitimate authority. Your advantage is the ability to create genuine communities of interest and purpose. Last but perhaps most important, cultivate what we might call strategic patience. It's easy to swallow the proverbial black pill when things seem hopeless. But remember, oligarchies often appear strongest just before they begin to crack. Their very efforts to maintain absolute control frequently generate the conditions for their own transformation. Thank you for watching.
What if the best system for leadership isn't the one we vote for? Election season has come and gone in European Union and the United States, and once again, millions of citizens across the globe feel let down. Promises broken, trust shaken, and yet this cycle repeats. But here's a question we don't ask enough. Is electing a leader truly the best way? Today, we're flipping the script. Let's explore why monarchy, a system often dismissed as outdated, might just hold the key to a stronger, more reliable leadership in the 21st century. But isn't monarchy elitist? It is a fair question. Monarchies may seem exclusive, but think of this. Is it more elitist to be born into a role you're trained to serve, or to climb a ladder built on wealth, privilege, and backroom deals? In a monarchy, the focus isn't on personal power, it is on duty. Monarchs are raised to serve their nation, trained in diplomacy, history, and public service from the moment they are born. Contrast this with elected leaders who often rise to power through political maneuvering, expensive campaigns, and the influence of donors. The truth is, monarchy isn't about one person at the top. It is about stability, unity, and continuity they bring to a nation. In our modern world, we often prioritize ideals over outcomes. But what if monarchy's strength lies in its very imperfection? Its longevity suggests that systems lasting centuries aren't arbitrary. They work because they adapt. Think about it. A monarch's role isn't to be perfect, but to act as a steady and unifying symbol. They remain above the fray of political infighting, representing a continuity that elected systems, with their constant turnover and campaign cycles, struggle to achieve. In constitutional monarchies, this balance is even clearer. The monarch provides stability while elected officials govern, offering a practical partnership, not an ideological straitjacket. Imagine a ship in a storm. Elected leaders are like the crew, constantly changing, each with their own map and priorities. Now, imagine a lighthouse that guides the ship regardless of the crew's plans. That is monarchy. Take recent examples. During crisis, monarchs often step in not with speeches or spin, but with symbolic action that unifies the nation. When floods devastated Valencia in Spain, politicians assessed the damage and then left, or better said, fled. King Felipe and Queen Letizia, however, stayed, offering not just words, but presence, solidarity, and a steady hand. This constancy is monarchy's unique strength, a sense of direction and continuity in an ever-changing political landscape. We live in a world where identity often feels fragmented. Monarchies provide a rare and enduring symbol of national unity. While politicians come and go, monarchs stand as a constant reminder of shared heritage, providing a sense of belonging that transcends political divisions. Sometimes simplicity is an advantage. A hereditary system eliminates the need for continuous resource training campaigns. It sidesteps the politics of personality and focuses on preparation and service. Unlike branding and spin required to win elections, a monarch's role is not up for debate. Monarchs don't need to sell themselves. This clarity of purpose, free from party politics or personal ambition, lets them focus on the role itself, representing the unity and continuity of their nation. So what does monarchy mean for democracy? It's not about replacing elections, it's about complementing them. Monarchies anchor nations in shared history and values, while elected governments handle policy and change. Elections offer choice, while monarchies offer stability. Together, they form a partnership that balances the dynamism of progress with steadiness of tradition. Now, what do you think? Could monarchy and democracy be the perfect team for modern governance? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
There you go. Jeez. So I hope you enjoyed that. But the thing is, it's really important for people to understand the differences and the fact that we haven't grown up since Greece. Okay. The same thing keeps getting done over and over again because the people never have a voice. So we would be able to make history and change everything for everybody by being the collective head of state. Because as he was saying, monarchy is better because nothing ever stops, right? We just go back to elections, but the government stands still. While, when there's no president, right now what we're seeing in the States, well, one's on the way out, the other one's on the way in, and neither are sane. Okay. So how can we guarantee that we can have final decision making authority in our country? Well, right now, because of King Charles being the head of state, the official head of state, and then the governor general being the one to be the head of state, given the handing down of the duties. Well, again, we keep changing governor generals, and the governor general really isn't working for the people, where the crown is supposed to be working for the people. So how can we ensure that we, the people, have a voice? We'll never have a voice until we remove that. So even if the government was to give us a referendums or putting laws that, oh well, like in BC, you can have recall election. Well, it takes you 18 months. You have to wait 18 months to recall somebody, and then it takes you another 18 months before something is done about it. Then oops, there's the elections. So again, a whole waste of time. It's designed to fail, and they're always going to make sure that the people never have the last word. In what we're structuring and the way we're doing it, we're not dissolving government. We're not dissolving anything. We're not overtaking anything other than our legal rightful place as the collective head of state and final decision makers, because it's our corporation. Okay, the government of Canada is our corporation, and the business of Canada. Excuse me. So the business of Canada, like people go, oh my God, Canada's a corporation, and go to Edgar and like, fuck, people relax. Okay. Quit being so gullible. If we were the head of state right now and in charge, we'd also be in Edgar. Okay. That's how business is done. People get all huffed and puffed over these pseudo common law idiots out there that are confusing everybody. And anything prior to 1960 no longer matters, because we have the right to be in charge of our country. So even if you say, oh, well, watch this video and this, it'll put you on the right track. It's BS. Okay. It's pure BS and a waste of time and a waste of energy. So if you want to know why I'm not posting anything more on Facebook other than these live streams, because I'm fed up of dealing with people who think they know everything and know F all. Okay. So until you've got 17 years of research, which another one doesn't, and you're only as good as your research and only as good as your own common sense, you're not going to make it. And the thing is what we are doing is doable if the people wake up. But you need to want the same thing for the same reasons and be together. Okay. And, when you're a shareholder, okay, they'll say, I could have showed you another video on how, they're so against, oh, it's mob rule. No, it's not mob rule. Because when you put it in this context, and I had said that to Daniel, he says, oh, Nicole, that's mob rule. No, it's not. Since when is everybody has a share? So when shareholders buy shares into a company and then they get to vote every year, okay, on how things are done, is that mob rule? No. That's everybody making sure that their business goes good, taking care of business properly, and that everybody has, what they want. And it's the same thing for us as the shareholders, co-owners of Canada and everything within it. So why settle for referendums and begging for referendums or going through the motions or having to, do so much? All we need to do is take our rightful space. Nothing major. They just remove Charles, place the people as the collective head of state with all the benefits of the sovereign, which is the whole of the collective. I mean, you wouldn't be able to go to a cop and say, hey, I own you now. You have to do what I tell you. No, we own as a collective. And this is where we have to do everything in our power for the benefit of the whole. So when people look at Alberta and say, oh, yeah, we're going to, we're going to increase the oil and we're going to get all richer in Alberta. Well, guess what? All Canadians and Indigenous peoples in Canada own that oil. The electricity from BC, Ontario, Quebec are owned by all Canadians. They run them separately like we were still in a colonial style to fool everybody. And that's why you have, like, the separation of, you know, if you make so much, a province makes so much money, they have to give to the other provinces. Okay, you're not just a an Albertan, or just a Quebecer, or just an Ontarian, or just a Nova Scotian, or no, you're a Canadian. So let's get that understood, people. Okay, people need to get their heads out of their asses and start thinking, and maybe then they'll be able to, wipe themselves properly so they can have common sense and see it when they see it. So we have to stick to common sense. We have to stick together. So it's discouraging when we're trying to help all Canadians, and then you've got groups and people who are doing live streams and have all the people listening to them, and while we're struggling, and they're removing any comments we try to make to reach the people. Their stupidity is hurting themselves. They're hurting all Canadians, not just us, but anybody who trashes the CPU and the Canadian referendum we're trying to do and doesn't want to help us is cutting themselves off at the knees, and the future of their children, because they really don't understand what we are doing out of their own stupidity. So when we have to fight the government, we have to fight everything. We have to fight our own people because of their stupidity. Well, what are we left with? The CPU is not a Facebook group, people. We're not, everything's free on Facebook to get the information out. No, we are a corporation, because only corporations can fight corporations. We are not for profit. We are also secure that when you give us a donation, that's our personal property. The government can't touch it. So we did everything in our power to ensure that when people donate to us, it's confidential. When people sign our documents, they're confidential. Okay. So again, we've got over 1,100 signatures. Is anybody going to take that seriously? We have tons of people sharing, but then they themselves don't go and sign the document. I see them sharing, but I don't see their names coming in. And it's like, what the hell, people? Yeah, share. But, and the CPU, we have bills to pay. So when people bitch because we're asking for donations, or we're asking people to join for $25 a year after you've signed your referendum, well, every signature costs us money. Who do you think pays for that? Do you think that we're making millions here? Mm-mm. We're in a huge deficit to keep this going, because we kept hoping that this would continue and eventually people would wake up. But there's always something thrown into our path. Now there's this really nice letter written, stating, let's demand for referendums and leave it at that. And it's like, okay, well, sounds great, but there's a huge flaw. A huge flaw. And that's not true freedom. You want true freedom? Sign your referendum. Support the CPU. Join for $25 for the year. Help support us so that we could keep going. Because I'll tell you, the minute we can no longer pay our bills, the lights are going to go off. And all of this goes away. So it's up to every Canadian citizen to do their part. We're not asking for a huge sacrifice to save your country. The one thing that is a huge sacrifice is you making yourselves educated. That takes time. That takes energy. We're asking for your support. So please stop putting us down every time. Oh, you're always asking for money. Well, listen, how many times do you give away for something stupid or a knickknack or whatever, but yet you won't pay $25 a year for the future of your country? That's too much. We're being offensive. Freedom isn't free. And anybody who says to me again that please stop saying freedom isn't free, they can do all kinds of things. Yeah, any which way you look at it is a sacrifice, and everything costs money. So even if they want to go to parliament, that costs money. What's it going to do? Where are you going to get your best benefit? Where are you going to make sure your money counts? What action are you going to take? Are you going to try to do this little one thing and that one thing that doesn't correct the governance of Canada? Vaccines. It's only one item. Okay. Some of the corruption, fighting this court case, that court case. They're little battles. They're not the war. We need to win the war. Relying on the Conservatives to save you? Forget that. That's asking for a Band-Aid. And will they do what they want? Well, go and look at Lucifer's minions. Stephen Harper. Mulrooney. Are they any different than Trudeau? Trudeau was a little bit more bold. The other ones, more hypocrites. But go and dig deep into what they've done, and then you'll see it. So anyways, now we're going to go to the North American Union, and I want to show you this video. I'm going to have to do a share screen here and see where I can find it. YouTube video, North American integration. Is this it? No. Oh, hang on here. I should be able to find it through this here. Okay. Oh, North American. Yep. Okay. NAFTA, North American Union. Okay, this one. We'll start with this one first. Actually, I'm just going to go to the video here. Open link in browser. Okay. So coming here. Doesn't seem to want to change here. I'm using another, instead of Google, I decided to use Microsoft Edge and North American Union. No, okay. So I'm going to have to do a stop share, I think, live. Oh, boy. Okay, I have it here. Whoops. Okay, so I can show it to you, I think, from here. Okay, where am I here? Okay. Now, screen share. Share screen. Okay. Media player. I just have to find my media player here. And it doesn't show it to me. Oh. Okay, NAU NAFTA Superhighway. Okay, NAU NAFTA. NAFTA superhighway. Okay, videos. Oh, there's a lot of them. Okay, that's weird. I can't find it now. I'm trying to find it on YouTube here. Just give me a second. Search across my channel. That's not what I want. It's another one. Okay. Go to escape. I hate having this NAFTA. It's a really old, well, it looks like it's an old video. And it's funny because it wasn't that long ago. Oh, here we go. Got it. Okay, I'm just going to stop it here, and I'm going to do the CC for the French people here, and just to make sure that they can also follow. Okay, and now NAU, where we go, share. Okay, and I hope you can all see this here.
And more important, I think, in the legislature is finding out who's writing some of this stuff and then digging out and then finding out who their playmates are, because there's stuff that is just crazy going on. 911, you know, we had 911 and everybody wanted us all to be secure, and we get Homeland Security and the Patriot Act and all this other stuff. And yet our borders are open.
And so it's really a scam on the American people. But when you start to dig into it, you find that there are people in powerful positions that really don't want to secure those borders. And as we look into it, that's where this issue of the North American Union really starts to come up. What it is an agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, essentially to form what they call the Security and Prosperity Partnership, SPP. If you want to find out about it, you can go to the government website, spp.gov, and what that translates into is the North American Union. In other words, drawing our borders, erasing our border with Mexico, erasing our border with Canada, and drawing a new line around what they're going to call the North American Union. And the plan is to have this accomplished by 2010. Laws with Canada and Mexico. They say the purpose of it is, and it's really being run through the Commerce Department, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is very much involved in promoting it, is to have free trade and to be able to not have people having to stop at the borders and all of this. But the real bottom line is, who will this help? It will help the corporations, the capitalists, just like sending all of our jobs overseas that they've already done. This will eliminate the American standard of living, the American middle class. And you can see some of the ways they're going to do that.
What American way of life?
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah,
that's
what
right.
middle class?
That's right. The real problem is that this isn't happening in Congress. This isn't happening in the U.S. Senate. This is happening outside of all of that with a bunch of bureaucrats from Canada, Mexico, and the United States under the direction of the President of the United States, the President of Mexico and the Premier of Canada as they work to integrate America without a treaty, outside the Constitution, outside the Congress, outside of our U.S. Senate.
I mean, I went to this flowery website, spp.gov, Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. And then I read their dribble.
Now, I don't know lately if you've read the Constitution, but nowhere in the Constitution does it say anything about working groups or harmonizing or integrating our laws with foreign countries in a way that we would bypass the Congress of the United States. Of course, part of this, many of you may have heard, Dennis, is the NAFTA superhighway.
Right.
Now, this NAFTA superhighway, as it has been dubbed, is like 4 football fields wide. It has 10 lanes with corridors for utilities and gas, for trucks, for cars. It's going to start in Lazaro Cardenas in Mexico, go through Texas. They call that part the Trans-Texas Corridor. There we're going to have a terrible problem with eminent domain. Millions and millions of acres of private property will be taken off the tax rolls and put into this Trans-Texas Corridor. It's going to stop in Kansas, where we're going to have an inland port, a Mexican port, so you can offload
Kansas
stuff.
City.
Yeah, in Kansas City.
Kansas City's a port, an international port.
It is, and what you're going to have, they have actually sovereign territory that will be Mexican in Kansas. They will bring the trucks up from Mexico without being inspected on Mexican trucks, which are substandard, and we won't know what's in those trucks. Who is going to benefit from this NAFTA highway?
Well, in reading this, and when we talked, I did start reading this, and then I'd get mad, and then I'd stop, and then I'd read it again, and then repeat the cycle. But China,
there's the answer.
China, I couldn't believe that's what kept emerging. China is benefiting from Kansas City becoming a
Of course,
port.
that's the objective of corporations. If they could pay everyone nothing, that would increase their bottom line. So this is what we have, is a situation which will ultimately benefit the distribution of Chinese goods in America while putting more Americans, truckers, longshoremen, all the people that are in America doing it now, putting them out of work. If Americans would contact their congressmen and contact their U.S. senators and say, this is outrageous. Yeah. We are the United States of America. We are not interested in having a North American Union. We are not interested in the flowery words of security, prosperity, partnership. We believe in American sovereignty. This is a direct threat. We want you to stop this. Have an investigation, expose what's going on. That's what the American people need to do.
The authors of the North American Union, I wasn't surprised, I was again irritated severely, is the Council on Foreign Relations.
And that's very interesting.
Here they are
What
again.
we have essentially is a plan to benefit multinational corporations at the expense of the American people. I don't know that they support the North American Union. I would suspect that if most Americans really knew what was going to happen, that we would lose our sovereignty, that our laws were being harmonized by a bunch of bureaucrats behind closed doors, that they weren't ever planning to bring this before the U.S. Senate or the U.S. Congress, that they would oppose it. But they're clueless. They don't know what's happening, and they don't really have any way to find out because it's not in the national media.
They called it a bipartisan or nonpartisan bumper sticker. It said, "Run, Hillary, run." The Democrats put it on the back and the Republicans put it on the front.
Okay, so that was a part of that. And if you remember well, back in 2008, all of this was going down. They've actually done a lot of that fast pass that you can apply for between Canada and Mexico. And that highway was going to come right up to Manitoba. So, but anyways, they do have the fast pass right now. There's a lot of things that have been done nobody knows about, but the North American Union Okay, it was all about the Security Prosperity Partnership, which Stephen Harper signed. And it's all done through business. Okay, they're doing this through business. So while they can do whatever they want across the border and whatever, you know, and they're coming out with the CBDC and all this, this is all part of this strategy. That, you know, and this is when I really woke up in 2008, and then I came to Six Nations, and I thought, oh my God, we can't allow this to happen. And since then, you know, in 1993, Mulrooney is the one that actually brought in the World Trade Organization. We were the first country to allow world trade. Everybody was protesting worldwide. They didn't want the World Bank. And then the World Bank is controlled by the United States. So is the United Nations and all of these things. And it makes me laugh when Trump says, we're going to be walking out of the United Nations. Well, excuse me, it's right inside your country, you idiot. So anyways, it's what he's talking about is the agreements, right? And who is allowed to, the only ones that have been allowed since the creation of the World Bank to choose who was going to be the president is the president of the United States. So if you don't know any of this, and then when they did open government, Obama and Harper, open government, and now if you go to the open government that they've created, we thought, okay, well, hey, it'll be easy for us to be able to do what this, you know, as the people being the collective head of state, everything is supposed to be open government. We're supposed to be able to see everything that's going down, and you know, and they made it sounded great, right? Well, guess what? No new information has been included in there since 2015. But Obama and Harper met in 2010, and then finally 2011 came around, ready for it. And what does every country who's part of that have to report to? The United States. When we spoke to young men who were in the yellow vest in France, okay, and we had Kathy that was there in France. When we were talking to two of the young men on Zoom, they said, oh, well, we went to the States and we got our courses for open government. And I said, so you work for the government. What the hell are you doing being the leaders of the yellow vest? So who created the yellow vest but the governments themselves? Okay. So listen, people, it's time you wake up and smell the roses, because there are roses, okay, that we could have and change all of this for the sake of Canadian citizens and our people, as well as for the United States citizens who are lost at the wheel. Because why does Trump need our water? Why does Trump want our electricity? Why he needs all of these things, the oil, and he's going to put in the tariffs? Why? Because they need to. Trump is coming after every single Canadian citizen through business. And who's O'Leary wanting? Oh, he wants an economic union. Well, that's what the North American Union is. And then if in the book, The North American Union by Robert Pastor, the first one, was the plan for the North American Union and the SPP, Security Prosperity Partnership Agreement. And that was all together. And John Manley, of all people, who should have been strung up by the balls, I'm glad he's passed on too. But, you know, he left us in a mess. And Robert Pastor is also passed on. But they wrote, after there was a whole uproar over this thing, then they changed the book to Building a North American Community. And Canada was going to foot the bill with our natural resources in a bank for Canada, US, and Mexico, where all of our assets would become one. Okay. And If the United States did something, well, our natural resources, it was going to be given without, okay, to the United States without collateral. Like, I mean, they can do anything. So, I mean, it was like, okay, well, shoot me now. This is what our country is doing. And this is where Canada and the US negotiated the Indigenous nations. Who's going to handle the Native peoples in Canada and in the United States? Well, Canada and the US, I couldn't find it on the Canada SPP website, but it sure as hell was on the United States website, where they decided in a one paragraph that, let's keep it the way we're doing it now. You handle your side and we'll handle our side, and we'll deal with that the way that is. Okay. So we don't want to wake them up. Okay. With doing anything that they'll be upset. And then, we're going to have more nasty things to deal with. So you have to understand exactly what happened, and then look up, what Shelley Ann Clark went through, because she was the one that helped Mulrooney. She was the one that Mulrooney brought in to change all of the documents for NAFTA. So all of this is also included in NAFTA. So when Trump is talking about this, hey, and then to bring in, everything else, he's bringing in the final nail in the coffin for the New World Order. But yet nobody wants, oh no, he's gonna save us. Well, hey. Just watch them. Just watch them. And the people who want to be fooled will keep getting fooled. But those of us in the know, we see what's coming. And it's a global takeover by corporations. And who's in bed with Trump? Okay. Is he for the people? He's a 5-year-old in grown-up pants, So the people need to wake up. You want to believe somebody else over us? Go right ahead. Go right ahead. But you're sinking this country and the future of your children. And for that, I'm going to say congratulations for ruining everybody's lives. Because if you don't do your homework, you don't support what we're trying to do, it's the only legal solution. Trying to put out little fires everywhere and little, trying to win little battles isn't going to suffice. So now what I should do is actually read to you the document that I have sent to Michael Manson of JCCF, which I sent him in regards to the Governor General and what she has the right to do, and how that all changed in 2020 when the documents from the Queen's letters to the Governor General Kerr in 1975 really changed how, the reserve powers of the Crown, can take back any country. But they have to have a good reason, okay, in order to protect a constitution. And this is why we don't want to disrupt government, because we can't. Okay. Anything that we do has to be done properly, has to be done one step at a time. And we start with placing the people in our right power, which since 1960 we've been allowed to do. And actually, even 1931 should have come back to us, but we weren't allowed to negotiate at the international level. But anyways, 1982 was the golden key that the 10 premiers, all of them, and even Levesque stole from the Canadian citizens along with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. So now Justin Trudeau is now finalizing it, but then you think Poilievre isn't going to continue it? He's a backer, 100% backer of Israel, who has us in a war who has us in almost civil war within our own our own cities here between these migrants that were brought in and who are trying to take over this country. So again, not respecting Canada or the people supporting them. So it's up to everybody to decide, what are you going to do? How are you going to clean this up? And we got to clean it up the right way. And then we got to get the United States off our backs. And by our rights, we take back all of our natural resources, and to hell with the corporations. And we get to tell the banks what they can do and can't do in Canada. And that's the reality of everybody in every country. So I've contacted, I don't know if I'm going to get a reply, but I've contacted Michael Manson. JCCF has been ignoring me forever. I gave them the documents that Michael Manson is going to court with to try and stop the prorogation to JCCF in 2020, May of 2021. And finally, now they're using it because, that document states a hell of a lot more. And it proves what I've been saying all along, that Canada is bound by the international laws that they have signed on to, as well as the UK. And now they're going to use it. They could have won most of their cases. All of the human rights cases could have been won, hands down. But no, don't listen to the CPU. They're not professional enough, or they're not cute enough, or, oh no, don't listen to them. Canada isn't bound by international law. Oh no. We'll see who's going to laugh last. But the sad part is that we might be too late. So now it's up to all of you, because if we can't keep this going with the support of the people, joining for $25 a year or becoming a CPU VIP member, which you get to work directly with us, and in our community, and have meetings and stuff like that. So that's $120 a year. What kind of a sacrifice is that to save your country? So if none of you is join and just sign, well, first of all, there's not enough signatures. And then if we can't keep this going financially, because we don't have the financial support from people, because, hey, they'd rather give to somebody's GoFundMe to save their cat or whatever than saving their own country. Go figure. If somebody's cat was sick and I could give, yes, I would give to a cat, for a cat or any animal for that matter. Because you know what? The animals in Canada are Canadians too. They belong to all of us, okay? So we need to take care of our pets here and all of our wildlife and everything else. But we don't need to go overboard. So please rewatch the little videos that played at the beginning, and then look up the North American Union and you'll be shocked. Okay? So now I'm going to see if I can actually share this document here with you in regards to open files here. I wasn't planning on doing this, but the court, Monash Palace one, is it the Palace Australian? There's the document that I sent to, oh shoot, hang on here. I don't know where this is coming from.
And more importantly,
okay,
in the legislature, finding out who's writing some of this stuff, and then digging out and then finding
cancel.
out.
Okay, I don't know where this is coming from.
The stuff there is just crazy going on.
Left
911. We had 911. And
that one stopped.
Everybody wanted us all to be secure, and we get
maybe
Homeland Security and the Patriot Act and all this other stuff.
I can't stop it.
And yet our borders are open.
And so it's really a scam on the American people. But when you start to dig into it, you
After
find
super highway.
there are people in powerful positions that really don't want to secure those borders. And as we look into it,
oh my gosh,
where this issue of the North American Union really starts to come. What it is an agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, essentially to form what they call the Security and Prosperity Partnership.
I really don't know where it's coming
If you
from.
want to find out about it, you can go to the government website, spp.gov. And what that translates into is the North American
No.
Union. In other words, drawing our borders, erasing our border with Mexico, erasing our border with Canada, and drawing a new line
I'm
around
trying
what they're
to.
going to call the North American Union. And the plan is to have this accomplished by 2010. Laws with Canada and Mexico. They say the purpose of it is,
Okay.
and it's really being run through the Commerce Department.
So
and
you're still hearing
US,
this, but still
Chamber of
good.
Commerce is very much involved in promoting it.
And now it's coming in
free
from somewhere
trade,
else.
to be
Oh,
able
there
to
we go.
not
There, a page that I tried to open on Google about an hour ago is finally took all this time to open up. So now you can see why I had to switch to actually Microsoft Edge. So, but anyways, the whole thing here is in regards to what the Governor General has said and what he's done in 1975. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back later at a later date to go through that once we hear exactly what happens with Michael Manson and the judges to see if they're going to force the reopening of Parliament. But anyways, he has all of the information. And like I said, last time when I sent the email to Allison, her secretary thanked us, and I got the thank you for the email back. But this time with Michael Manson, not a peep. Okay. And I also and I received a confirmation email saying that my email had reached the Prime Minister of Greenland. Because if Greenland doesn't want to stay with Denmark and they want to become their own sovereign people and their own country, and they don't want to join the United States, well, they can join us in our people's liberation. Okay, so anyways, not sure what's going to happen with that, if it's going to be ignored, if it's all talk or whatever the hell it is, and who's going to be interfering in that. But anyways, we're making strides. If people are starting to talk about referendums in Canada, that's good, but we got to make sure that it's done for the right reasons and that the people don't stop going after the gold and the control of this country for true freedom, because until we are the collective head of state, there will never be any freedom on this planet anywhere, and especially not in Canada. So somebody with a president. So now just sit back and watch Trump. And then in 4 years from now, if we're still alive, given what's happening worldwide, let's see how great he was. Okay. Or if somebody didn't burn him at the stake. So anyways, I'm going to leave you with that. And I'm going to go get prepared because tonight we have our first meeting of the year with our members and also our referendum community members. So hopefully we'll see some new faces this evening. That's at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're a member, don't forget the meeting. Excuse me. You can go into the community. And what we've done is now all of our meetings will have a different number for every session. Excuse me. Wow. When I talk too much, I run out of air. So time to plug myself in. And I'll speak to you later. Please join the CPU at thecpu.ca as a VIP member, or go to the CanadianReferendum.ca, and you can become a referendum community member there. Please sign your referendum. Thank you. Bye-bye.